Parenting strong-willed children can feel like a daily battle, leading to stress, frustration, and power struggles.
We project into the future, right? That first phone call we get from school. Oh, my daughter in preschool can't sit still. And now we project and think, is she going to be okay?
This is Parenting Great Kids with Dr. Meg Meeker.
Our guest today, Kirk Martin, understands these challenges firsthand. As the founder of Celebrate Calm and host of the Calm Parenting podcast, Kirk has helped nearly 1 million parents create a more peaceful home by changing how they interact with their kids. Kirk, welcome to Parenting Great Kids.
Dr. Meg, I'm super excited to be here.
Well, it's fun. I'm feeling calmer already. You and I have been talking for a few minutes before we started, but you're right on target with this teaching parents how to be calm because, as a pediatrician, I see a lot of anxiety in kids and parents that's just on the rise. And sometimes I just don't have the time or necessarily the tools to say, okay, just chill down. So you have a podcast, Calm Parenting Podcast, and you have countless conversations with parents. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned from them and particularly about stress in parenting?
Well, one is it's normal. Right? Like it would be really weird if you had a family and things didn't go wrong. So it's normal for moms and dads that you're kind of stressed out. And what I learned along the way is, well, one is the only person in life that I can control is myself. And when I try to control other people's behavior, it always backfires and it causes more stress. And ironically, with our kids, the quickest way to change your child's behavior is to first control your own, controlling your own anxiety. Because you know this, Dr. Meg, we project into the future, right? That first phone call we get from school. Oh, my daughter in preschool can't sit still. And now we project and think, is she going to be okay? Or that middle schooler that just sits in a hoodie sweatshirt for 18 straight days and plays video games. And we think, is anybody going to hire that child? Right. Anybody going to marry that child? Yeah. And when we get anxious, we start to lecture. And that tends to bring the negativity. And then kids shut down.
Yeah. Well, I think you're absolutely right. We were talking about strong-willed children and parenting a strong-willed child. I had a couple, and now I've got a couple grandkids who are very strong-willed. It's hard because they know how to push your buttons. And when a strong-willed child just sort of stares you in the eyes and said, I'm going to take you down, it's really hard to stay calm. So give us some help with a strong-willed child. If a child comes and he challenges you, and we all know when kids are challenging us, what do you do and how do you stay calm with that kid with their hand on the hip that says, no way am I going to pay attention to you?
Right. And so these strong-willed kids, you know this, it's like they wake up in the morning with an agenda and they know what they like. They know what they don't like. And what they don't like is anything that you want them to do. And so there are power struggles over everything. And you found this, the traditional parenting strategies will just give them consequences, tends not to work because they don't care about the consequences. I'm sure with your grandchildren, you've seen one of them be like, well, I'm going to box up all your stuff and take it away if you don't pick it up. And you'll turn around and they'll box it up themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't care.
Yeah. And they'll walk down the street. Yeah. Do it. And so they're like stove touchers. And so one of the more, this is for me, this is a little bit more advanced concept, but giving them ownership of their choices within your boundaries to say, hey, here's what I want done, right? Whether it's doing homework, your chores, but I will relinquish control over how you do it as long as you get it done. Because the strong-willed child is never going to do things the exact way you want them done because they value their agency and independence more than they value things. So I'm not saying, hey, if you want that, It's or want to do that. It's, "Hey, this is getting done. Hey, I bet you can't use your creativity to do it in a way that I never thought of."
Oh,
I like making things a challenge for these kids. When we used to have these camps in our home, and I tell the kids, "Hey, here's what needs to be done, but I bet you can't do it blindfolded or
oh.
backwards."
Mhm,
And so when it's a challenge, now they get to use their creativity.
mhm.
Now there's that brain stimulation that comes because I don't want to do it the way my mommy and daddy want
Right,
me to do it.
right.
And so the answer isn't to say, well, it's okay. You don't have to do it.
Mhm,
No, we don't let them get away with things. It's kind of flip it around and say, of course you don't want to do it the regular way.
mhm.
That's boring. Bet you can't use your creativity and do it in some weird way.
Yeah.
And the strong willed child will be like, wait, I can do it a different way. Yeah, I relinquish control over how you do it. But that's hard because a lot of us, Dr. Meg, have control issues, right?
Yes, we
And so
do.
it's like,
Yeah.
right.
Well, when we were talking at the beginning and you were saying the only person's behavior you control is yourself, you can't control another person's behavior. That's really hard when you have kids because there's boundaries we have to set for them, and there's some things they can do and some things they can't do. And so we get into this power struggle. I want you to do this, and if you don't do it, then ABC is going to follow. So talk about something very specific. Like you've got a kid who hates to do homework and comes home and she's in fifth grade, fourth grade, and says, I'm not going to do my homework. And you say, you have to do your homework or you're going to get a D. I don't care. I'm going to get a D. Talk to that mother.
Okay. So, two things here. One would be ownership, and the other is giving kids tools.
Hmm.
Because just saying that if then, if you don't do it, then you lose your play date.
Hmm.
Well, for some of our kids, doing homework after they've been at school all day long, especially our kids kind of on the spectrum, they're kind of done. And sometimes they do have focus issues. So I mix ownership and tools. So one is, well, honey, of course, I love the phrase, of course. Of course, you don't want to do homework right now because you'd rather be playing, right? Of course, like, I don't want to fix dinner and have to do all the things I do. So why don't we do it in a different
Hmm.
way? So why don't we, why don't you stand at the kitchen counter? And while you're doing that, you can rock back and forth because rhythm is actually very, very important for helping with the learning process. We do a lot of work with kids with ADHD on the spectrum. So you can stand at the kitchen counter instead of sitting at the table.
Hmm.
You can rock back and forth and you can eat a snack while you're doing your work. And I would experiment with listening to music
Oh.
because music, chewing, rocking back and forth all involve rhythm.
Hmm.
And that creates rhythm in the brain. And some of that fidgeting, so to speak, is really helpful for the learning process. So, watch now, instead of having a big power struggle, young lady, you need to sit at the table. If you do not sit at the table and do your, and the strong willed child, as soon as you go to that
Yeah.
tone,
Yep.
Dr. Meg, they're like, oh, I can tell you're
Yep.
irritated and I'm just going to push. And now, Mom, we're going to be talking about your misbehavior when you start yelling.
Yeah.
So instead of fighting, I say, of course you don't. So here are two different ways you could do this. And now I'm giving them ownership to say, you've got this amazing brain. Why don't you come up with a more interesting way? Can I give one more?
Sure.
Another one? Hey, instead of sitting at the table, I will put a blanket over the kitchen table. We now have a fort. Forts are fun when you're a kid.
Right.
Hey, why don't you get under the table? Now no one's watching you. A lot of strong-willed kids don't want to be watched. They like their independence.
Hmm.
I'll give you a flashlight under there and throw your mac and cheese under there because that's what a lot of our kids, mac and cheese and chicken nuggets.
Yep.
And now you've just changed the dynamic from sit and do homework the way I always did it to, oh no, it's getting done, but we can come up with a creative way to do it. In fact, why don't you come up with the way?
Yeah. Talk about talk about kids who fight. A lot of siblings will fight, and a lot of parents will get in there and say, stop fighting, stop fighting. And then pretty soon they're yelling at the kids about yelling at each other. And so when you have a really tense, stressful situation like that going on between some kids, how can parents come into that situation? Because having your kids fight is very stressful for parents. And I found when we were raising our kids, that really stressed me out because I thought, oh, they hate each other. They're never going to be friends, so on and so forth. So what do you recommend to a parent that they do if their kids are fighting?
Okay, I'll give you one example. And I do want moms and dads, I want you to know it's normal, right? One of the first stories in history of it is of one son murdering his brother, right? We've got Cain and Abel. Like it's not like it's new. It didn't happen with video games. It's been there since the beginning. And usually sibling fights for me come from one of two places: boredom.
Yep.
I'm bored, so I'm going to poke my brother.
Yeah.
When he reacts to me, now my mom comes into the room. You know what? How many times have I told you you have to play together well? You go to your room. And then usually when mom comes in the room and starts yelling, then dad gets
Right.
upset because men don't know what to do with their wives
Yeah.
when their wives are upset. So, Dr. Meg, think how brilliant this is. I'm a kid who likes a lot of brain
Mhm.
stimulation. And a lot of our adopted kids, by the way, they really like intensity because that feels like connection to them.
Ah,
And so by poking my brother or looking at him, I got 3 people to get upset,
yeah.
and now I'm in control of them. And then the other part where I think sibling fights come from is resentment. And that was kind of the Cain and Abel thing
Mhm.
of, well, I'm the strong-willed child. I'm always in trouble. You're always picking on me. So now I'm going to pick on the golden child in the
Yep.
family. So
Yeah.
2 kids are fighting in the living room. Try this sometime. Walk into the living room and lie down in the middle of the living room floor.
Oh.
It will freak your kids out because they're expecting the mommy and daddy
Yeah.
lecture about we need to respect and love each other as siblings.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big fan of our mommy and daddy lectures because they tend not to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I lie down on the floor and the kids will stop squabbling because they will look at you like, what are you doing?
Right.
Now I can teach because discipline means to teach. It's the
Mhm.
word where we get disciple, to
Right.
teach. I can look at the strong-willed child and say, I know exactly what's going on. You've got this really busy brain. It's a cool brain, really creative, but you hate boredom. When you get bored, you pick on your brother, but that doesn't work well because then you lose your stuff. But 2 things I know about you: you have a big heart and you love money because strong-willed kids are born entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So if you want to get your brain stimulation by picking on your brother, that's just not going to work well for you.
Mhm.
But if you want to come help me make dinner, I bet we could brainstorm 3 different ways to help some people in the neighborhood earn some money.
Mhm.
And then if you want to give money, because these kids have big hearts, to St. Jude's Kids with Cancer, I'll match
Yeah.
that. So what I've done is I came in and instead of adding to the drama, why can't you guys ever get along? Instead, I came in and I started to problem solve and said, I know exactly what's going on. And other child, you always react to your brother.
Mhm.
You're like your brother's puppet. Why do you keep doing that? And I can teach that child how to stop reacting to the provoking child. So by controlling myself, I have so much more control than by trying to control 2 little human beings.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's so many different dynamics going on, and it's hard as a parent when you're trying to diffuse tension between this child and yourself and maybe your spouse. It can get very really kind of painful. Let's talk about other stress. There's a lot of stress in parents that come from outside the home. Work, coworkers, time management. They don't have enough time for their kids. They don't have, enough time to make good meals and so on and so forth. And what I have found is that a lot of times if parents are stressed out, by the end of the day when they're with their kids, it just sort of gets dumped on their kids. And kids are extremely sensitive to how their parents are behaving and interacting with them. And I found that the stress just sort of, becomes part of the child and then their stress. So, can you talk about parents and their own stress and how to deal with their own stress before it gets sort of spilled onto their children?
Yes, and that was an awesome point because these kids, especially the strong-willed kids, they are so hypersensitive and they can pick up on a little change in the tone that, that kind of clip tone. Sarah, I told you. And as soon as you go there, like, why are you yelling at
Right.
me? And you're not even yelling yet,
Right.
but they're hearing it as that.
Yeah.
So I'm like you, I'm a big fan of parents with a little bit of self-care about taking care of yourself first.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, if everything is about the
Yeah.
kids, you will be super stressed. So whatever it is for you, I'll give you a small one, which is um, kids stress us out because it's all out of our control.
Mhm.
So sometimes even doing one small thing in the kitchen that feels within your control of cleaning up the kitchen sink. Okay, now at least one thing in my kitchen is in order.
Mhm.
That can help. Not all parents have the time, but if you do have the time to get exercise, I love the idea of getting home from work with the kids, going for a walk. Fresh air is hugely important.
Mhm.
As a dad, I would come home from work, go right up to my bathroom, and just splash water on my face and try to get that transition from I'm going from work to the home. But can I add one thing here, which is interesting for a lot of
Mhm.
us? When I talk to men at work, we're like calm, in control. Things are going wrong. We problem solve. We're not yelling at people. We walk through the door of our home and there are like 3 Legos on the floor. And we're like, why is there a mess everywhere?
Right.
And there's chaos. And here's a weird thing. Some one day practice this. Talk to your kids kind of like they're your colleagues at
Mm.
work. Because with your colleagues at work, if I have an employee and I'm like, hey, uh, I've seen your work in the past, it's been excellent. This last project, not up to your standards. I know you're capable of more. So why don't you grab a notepad, come into my office, and I'll help you with this
Yeah.
project. See, but when I come home with my child, now it's, "How many times have I told you not to d—" You wouldn't do that
No.
with someone at work, and because it wouldn't work.
Right.
But at home, it's not saying your friends with your child are equals, but that tone of voice, hey, that choice, that decision that you just made right there, yeah, that's not gonna work well for you.
Mhm.
I can show you a different way. And sometimes knowing, Dr. Meg, that, and you and I discussed this because we're older and we have older kids. We still look very young, obviously,
Right.
but we look great. We're not as stressed as the young parents.
Right.
That's what it
Yeah.
is. But when you step back a little bit, you realize my job is not to control my kids, it's to teach them.
Right.
And I expect kids to mess up because that's part, like I grew up on Leave It to
Yeah.
Beaver. It was the story of a kid who did stupid stuff
Right.
every episode. And so when I can relax and know my house is supposed to be messy, a toddler is supposed to ruin my
Yeah.
agenda, my teenager is probably going to have a little bit of attitude,
Mhm.
but that doesn't make me a bad parent. Now I can relax into it and say, I step out of my own anxiety. Can I add one here?
Sure.
I get afraid I'm talking
No,
too much.
no.
So so my son came out of the womb with boxing gloves on, and I just had breakfast with him and went to the gym, and he's still like
Yep.
that. Like he is high energy.
Mhm.
But I remember when he was in those tween years and he was kind of feeling out his independence, and he came at me with some attitude. And I used to react all the time. And instead, I stepped back and I said, Case, you know what I've noticed? The last 43 times, kind of a joke, but not really. The last 43 times you used attitude, it was because you were anxious, frustrated, or hungry.
Mhm.
So you've got two options. You may continue to talk to me like that if you want, but it never ends well for you.
Right.
Or you could grab some chips, I'll grab some salsa, I'll meet you on the deck and help you, with whatever you're struggling
Yeah.
with. And I like that model because I'm not letting him get away with it,
Mhm.
but I'm also not reacting. I can't believe that you would talk to your father like that. Like, stop taking it so personally.
Yeah.
I'm the grown adult.
Right.
And that helps so much to get out of my own agenda and say, okay, something's going on with my child. And that's what the good mentors in my life have been like. They've said, hey, you're struggling a little bit. Let me get you back on track.
Mhm. And so really what you're saying is try to figure out what's really going on inside your child and then move in and try to calm that down because you're right. If you realize that your child is back talking or doing because they're stressed or they're anxious or they're worried or they're hungry, coming in and saying, don't do that and don't behave that way, it really doesn't do anything except sort of make things worse. So we've talked a little bit about helping parents sort of regulate their own behavior first, which I think you're right on. And that is so hard to do. So if you have a child who has anxiety, let's say, I see fairly young kids in my practice, 8, 9, 10, with just anxiety, and the parents know they're anxious. I don't know what they're anxious about, but they're always anxious. Where do you start with that parent in trying to help understand what's going on with the child and then what they should do about it?
Okay, I'll give you a good practical idea. So, a lot of the kids we work with, they struggle with anxiety going to new
Mhm.
places. Partly it's because they've got these really busy brains and it feels like everything's kind of like, out of sorts inside their brain, and so they try to control people and situations, and anxiety comes from unknowns. So, you ask your child, "Hey," I'll do it with my son, "Case, you wanna do, taekwondo class this spring?" And he's like, "Sure, dad, sign me up." Well, I come home a week later, "Case, come on, we gotta go." He's like, "My stomach's upset." And I'm like, "No, I paid $175 for that class. Get your little butt in the car."
Right.
And he will eventually say, "I'm not going.
Mhm.
Taekwondo is stupid, you're stupid."
Yeah.
And we all hear that, rightly is like that's defiance and disrespect. But with these kids, it's not an excuse, but they're just anxious because they're going to a new place, they've never been, there's a new instructor, and there's kids who might pick on them.
Mhm.
So instead, when I start to get that resistance, I'll say, "Hey, is your stomach a little bit upset?" Because anxiety tends to live in the stomach.
Mm.
It makes, stomach upset, which is why we seek, comfort foods when we're upset.
Mhm.
And so my son will be like, "Mhm. Oh." And so, 2 things. One is I normalize anxiety.
Mm.
Of course you're anxious. You are going to a new place you've never been to meet new people. I'm the same way. If I have to give a presentation at the office, I'm anxious because I don't know if they're gonna receive it well. I'm anxious before this podcast because Dr. Meg is very famous, and I grew up kinda listening to her, and she's important, and I love her stuff, and so I wanna do a good job. So my stomach was a little right before I came here, I told Casey, I said, "I've gotta leave early because I need to be prepared. This is an important one.
Oh,
This is Dr. Meg
no.
Meeker." And so normalize. Of course you're anxious about that
Mhm.
test.
Mhm.
Because and what that tells me is you're conscientious and you want to do a good job. And then the second thing for anxiety is wherever your kids go, ask another adult to give them a job to do. So if I were to go a few days ahead of time to that taekwondo place and say, "Hey, Mr. Taekwondo, my son's going to be in your class. He loves other people. He's great for them, not always great for me, but he loves helping other people." And if Taekwondo guy or a teacher says, or a Sunday school teacher says, "Oh, Rebecca, I could really use your help.
Mm.
Next week, when you come to my class, next Sunday morning, could you get here a few minutes early and help me?"
Oh, wonderful.
See,
Mhm.
right? So now when I say we need to go, instead of all the unknowns, "Mom, Dad, remember that guy, that lady said that she really needed my help and we need to leave early." And now their brain is focused on what they can control, not all the
Mhm.
unknowns. That's extremely helpful with the anxious kids.
That is a great technique, and I think of the times I should have been able I should have used that in years past because one of the things that kids get very anxious about, particularly during high school, they get social anxiety because they're afraid everybody's looking at them, everybody knows they're stupid, everybody thinks they're ugly, and so they go into a situation and they just sort of withdraw and they get so anxious. But if somebody tipped off a teacher and said, would you ask my daughter to come in and help you do something?" At least they feel like they have an ally, they have a purpose,
Mm.
and you're absolutely right, they're not gonna focus on thinking about if people are making fun of them or whatever, because high school years can be so hard for kids.
Well, and that's awesome, and normalize it.
Yeah.
Of course, but here's what I want you to know. Every one of your friends is thinking the same thing. Sarah has a little pimple that wasn't there yesterday, and Jacob has this, and everybody's so self-focused, they're not even looking at you. They're worried about you looking at
Yeah.
them. And so that I've found, Dr. Meg, as I've gotten older, that normalizing human nature
Mhm.
is so helpful to know. Oh, so all the other kids, yeah, everybody in middle school. Like middle school is the weirdest time of your whole life.
Mhm.
Like your hormones are all over the place. You're not a little kid, you're not a big kid anymore. And so even as a like I'm in my 50s, even I tell myself, of course, I'm going to this party.
Yeah.
Everybody else is going to be as awkward as me.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I'm the same way. With all the work I do, people think I'm a real extrovert, and I'm not. I'm very much an introvert. Put me in front of a computer for 8 hours a day to write something. I am happy, happy, happy. But going out into crowds and talking to people, it makes me very anxious and nervous. I don't really know why. It just kind of is. And I go anyway. And so I think, you're right. Sometimes I think it really helps kids to realize that we get anxious too, but the anxiety doesn't need to take you down. You just sort of push through it. And I think it really helps kids talking about it. It helps me, saying things, even though it's embarrassing. Um, but just talking it through can really, really help kids because anxiety has a lot of different faces in kids. A lot of parents think that kids will come to you and they'll be breathing fast and their heart rate will be up and their eyes are dilated and they're going to start crying. Well, not necessarily because, sometimes anxiety and depression in kids comes out sideways. And so it's
Mhm.
hard for parents to sort of understand that. You were funny, and you say that humor, can really help diffuse tension, in families. Talk about that a little bit because a lot of parents don't feel like they're funny, and they don't know what to do with humor, so talk to them, please.
I think just self-deprecating humor
Mhm.
of even just acknowledging of one of the big breakthroughs I had with our son, because I was always like, "Well, I'm the authority figure in the home. I'm the
Yeah.
dad." And there's this view of like, well, dad is this and I remember early on, one time just saying, "Hey, Casey, have you ever noticed that when little things go wrong, I like blow it out of proportion?" And he was like, "Yeah, dad. Mom and I talk about that all the
Yeah.
time. Like big things happen and you handle it fine, but something little." And so even pointing out one of my own traits, because it's not like your kids are going to be like, "I never noticed that."
Right.
But it humanized me, but
Mhm.
also it led to conversations where he said, "Little things bother me as
Mhm.
well." And so any kind of humor in that situation, like even if now you've got to watch because if your child's melting down and you just start doing a funny
Yeah.
dance, that could work really well. Or your child might say, "Why aren't you taking me
Right.
seriously?"
Right.
Right? So I'd experiment with it, but even without humor, I think the self-deprecating nature of like and that normalizing of course, I struggle with that. why do you notice one I did with my son was he was always like, "Why are you always in such a hurry?" And I said, "Well, Papa, he was career military.
Mhm.
And so if we weren't 5 minutes early, we were late. So have you noticed, Casey, when we're running late, I tend to rush you, gotta
Yeah.
go, and you go more slowly, and that triggers me more." And Dr. Meg, it was that to kind of teach them as you're walking and talking through
Mhm.
life. So it was very much with Casey, and I've seen it as he's married now in his conversations with his wife. They have these amazing conversations about, yeah, this is one of my weaknesses, and you're triggering me that way, which is my issue.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I answered your question exactly the right
No,
way,
no, that
but
no, that was terrific. I mean, no, 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 I think that was terrific. I I I love the idea about talking about yourself a little bit. I mean, obviously, you don't wanna overdo it. It's not always about a parent. But I think that when you give your kids permission to see your faults and to
mm,
critique you a little bit, um, it makes them feel good, and a lot of parents don't wanna do that because I think they feel they're gonna look, weak in their kids' eyes. Sometimes I will ask parents, I say, "I just don't know if I'm hurting my kid. I don't know if I'm making upset. I don't know." I say, "Ask them." "No, I can't do that
mm,
because they'll think I'm weak or stupid." I said, if you're worried how you're doing and you're worried if you're overreacting or if you're yelling too much, ask your kids because there's nothing that's going to get through to your kids like sort of inviting them to talk about you and talk about their experience of you. It is so freeing and that really opens up that communication. And in a lot of times when you're doing that, that self-deprecation comes in. I'm a bit clumsy and I trip and I've
right.
tripped and it really, really been embarrassing. And whenever the kids would say, "Oh, this just embarrasses me so much," I said, "Well, let me tell you, I was going to give a big,
Yeah.
huge lecture and hundreds of people. And I walked up on the stage and halfway up, I tripped going up the stairs. And I said, I totally get it. And I said, but I just laughed. And I think sort of inviting them into your crazy experiences or inviting them in to weigh in on how you're doing, it really can work in your favor and can really help the kids as well.
I love that. One of my favorite things that I challenge parents to do, especially as kids get a little bit older, but even young ones, our kids are really bright.
Yeah.
And I'll say, "Hey, does do I lecture you too much?
Yeah.
Does it ever feel like I only notice the things you do
Mm.
wrong?" Like, stick with those two. Do it this after you hear this podcast, do that. And I bet your kids will say something like, "Mom, Dad, yeah, sometimes it just feels like you pick out the things I've done wrong and you missed all the things I did right. And now you can apologize, not grovel,
Right.
but you can say, you know what? I apologize because there are so many things that you do well. And that's just having a normal conversation,
Right.
right? I don't want you bringing up your childhood trauma and how you and your spouse aren't intimate anymore, right? We're not
No.
talking about
That
that.
yeah.
We're just saying, like,
Very yeah.
do I lecture too much? Does it feel like you can never please me?
Yeah.
And I'll give you one more for, say, a tween or teen. Does it ever feel like I misunderstand your motives?
Mm.
Because that is a huge trigger as kids get older. Like, you don't understand me.
Right.
And so when you ask that, they'll be like, "Mom, Dad, like, yeah, I try to explain, but you don't believe me." And so there's a lot of pain under there. And now you can say, "Okay, I'm sorry I've done that. So tell me." And now you've just opened up this amazing conversation with your child. And now they're opening up and sharing something about themselves. I love doing that. I think it makes you not weaker. I think it makes you a lot stronger. And, and you know what? I wouldn't even use those words. I think it makes you become a trusted
Right.
person.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I'm after. I want, and you know this with having adult kids, one of the most beautiful things for me with a 31-year-old son is when he texts or calls and says, Dad, I really need your advice on something. And I'm like, yay, he's finally asking.
Finally. Yeah. Took 30 years,
Yeah.
31, but he's asking.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And to become the kind of parent as your kids get older that they respect you, they admire you, and it's it really affirms that you're doing something right and you've worked so hard to do it. My guest is Kirk Martin. He is the founder of Celebrate Calm and host of the Calm Parenting podcast. You can find his work at celebratecalm.com. And Kirk, how else can parents find you? Do you have social media accounts, I'm sure?
We do. We've got an Instagram account. I'm really active on Instagram, which is weird because I hate videos of myself. Mm-hmm. But I'm really active. So if you look up Calm Parenting Podcast, you'll find Instagram, Facebook, even the dreaded TikTok. I'm there.
That's right. Hey, parents, I'm Dr. Meg Meeker, and if you're ready for real solutions to your parenting problems from a pediatrician, join my Parenting Great Kids community today.
There's a reason so many parents trust Dr. Meg Meeker. Now her courses, parenting forum, and trusted answers are all in one place, the PGK Insider Community. Join free at meekerparenting.com.